see everybody. Let me make sure we're all done here. I think we are. Alright, we're going to be in James chapter 3 today. James chapter 3. We'll jump into our question before we get to there. And look at this area of the tongue. Is what it really talks about. It talks about that. Basically dealing with the weight of our words and the warning to teachers, actually. So let's go ahead and jump into the first question. We go back to lesson 8 with Joshua. The tabernacle was set up at what place when the Israelites settled in Canaan? Shiloh, exactly right. Who was present at the tabernacle in Shiloh when the land was divided? Was all the heads of the tribes, each tribe. So the head leader of each tribe is what you'd say. A lot of times you say elders, but you don't say that. So just there was a head, there was one, that'd be over each one, exactly. All right, so next one. Describe Jesus' first miracle. What was the first miracle? Turned water into wine. Describe the quality of the wine. What does it say? Best, better, however you want to look at it, that's what it tells us there. How many books in all are there in the New Testament? 27. Everybody agree with that? Yep, that's right. All right, good deal. All right, why was the third captain and his group of 50 sent by King Ahaziah, remember there were 3 different groups, to Elijah not burned up? So the other 2 groups were all burned up, and each captain there with it. Why was this one not? Exactly right, all the way around. And he bowed down. He was very humble. He wasn't, and the difference, remember, the other 2 captains were basically like, you come down here. And that third captain, he went up. He went up to there, and basically, don't burn us up, please. I'll humble myself before you. I know you're a prophet of God, and he understood all that, and he was okay because of it. All right, bring the next one. How did Elijah and Elisha cross the Jordan on dry land? How did they do that? Just basically what was done? They parted the waters with the mantle, exactly right, as we see there. What did Elisha repeat? When did Elisha repeat the act? When he went back across, remember they went east of the Jordan, they went across over to the east side, and then Elijah, the next point, was taken up to heaven, and then we see, of course, Elisha would go back and do the same thing. So before he went back, though, we asked this question: how was Elijah taken to heaven? In a whirlwind, exactly right. What dropped from Elijah as he went up? His mantle. That's exactly where Elisha would take that up from there. How can an individual, going back to James, go to James now, James 1. How can an individual obtain wisdom? Ask for it, exactly right. How should he or she act? By faith is what the Bible tells us. Next one, James did not say a person should be A, quick to hear, B, slow to speak, C, quick to argue, or D, slow to anger. I bet everybody knows this one, right? Yeah, it's pretty easy. Quick to argue. Actually, no, slow to anger. No, I'm kidding. It's quick to argue, of course. Just crazy. All right, next one. James 2. Should Christians show partiality or favoritism to those who are rich in worldly goods? No. The answer is no, absolutely not. Next one, yes or no? Do the demons believe in God? Yes, they sure do. The Bible is very clear about that. So it's very important to understand that it shows us it takes a lot more than just belief to make sure that you're right with Christ. Next one, as a result of their belief, what do? They tremble. And there we see how it even physically affects them. And believing in Christ and looking at who he truly is, Christ and God, it should physically affect us also in our lives, we would see. All right, so let's jump into James chapter 3. James chapter 3, we're looking at the tongue. James 3, 1 through 18. A lot of times it's just 1 through 12 when you do the tongue part. We're going to put it all together, of course, to go through this here. As I stated, the best way to really look at this chapter is this way, is that you look at the weight of our words and the warning to teachers that is found in it. And because you have both these things going on in this moment as we see James talking about this. So I'm sure, first of all, foremost, I'm sure we can all agree that words hold a massive power. I mean, they hold massive power, without a doubt. They can heal a broken heart. Without a doubt, they can do that. They heal someone's broken heart. At the same time, also, it can destroy a lifetime of trust in just seconds. That's what's crazy about the tongue. We text today, we email, we do social media, we talk on our phones, of course, and we know that we speak thousands of words basically daily. Yet how often with this do we stop to consider the spiritual weight of our speech, the spiritual weight of what's going on, how people are looking at us, how we're talking, what they see in us, and so on. You know, today we're going to examine James chapter 3, of course, and we need to realize, once again, James has pretty much done this through 1 and 2. Chapter 3 is saying he doesn't pull any punches. I mean, he just lays it out there as it is. He speaks directly to the root of our daily battles, to our mouths, and reveals that our speech is the ultimate test for our spiritual wisdom. This chapter 3 reads more like a punch list, really is what it is, a list of things that are happening, things, the way to look at it. And that's how we'll look at it. Some of these we'll just look at each verse, just go through each verse as we see these, but they'll move quickly through them. So as we think about this, we know that we begin by looking at the high standard set for those who speak for God, or and the sober reality that faces every single Christian as we see this fact. In fact, James opens this chapter with a stark warning that should make anyone who speaks publicly, pause for a moment. Pause, anybody that teaches any way whatsoever. And we're going to see, he even goes beyond just in the church, actually goes outside of it too, that we see here. And it's so important because God is going to hold those accountable, actually higher accountability than someone that doesn't. And so let's see what he says. So James chapter 3, verse 1, we begin. If someone will go and read that for us, please.
My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we should receive a spiritual gift.
Thank you. Now, when we look at this here, we need to understand, he's not saying, hey, if you're just worried you're not going to make it to heaven because you don't think you're a good teacher, you shouldn't teach. That's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about us to understand that everything we say that comes out of our mouth, if it does not connect and mesh perfectly with the Word of God, that's a problem. That's what's going to keep us out of heaven. And so he says, if you're going to take on this responsibility, make sure you're teaching right. There's nothing worse. I think when I've had a preacher tell me one thing, he goes, I hope I said, basically everything he said, he goes, and I understood what he was getting at, but what he said at first, he goes, I hope I understood everything I said. And I said, well, I hope you understood everything you said before it came out of your mouth. I mean, you cannot, just teach something like that. And that's why the Bible's clear about learning first what's there. Then, we get to that point where we teach and so on. So James 3:1 is important. The early church, as in our church today, really, we see the role of a teacher was highly respected during that time. People wanted the platform, actually. And this is why James is doing this. They were running into the problem of people doing it more for, look at me, instead of, what they were teaching. And so they wanted some type of authority, but James reminds us that leadership brings accountability, without a doubt. And teachers use their tongues to guide others. If they guide people wrongly, the damage is severe. God holds leaders to a higher standard. We need to understand as we think about this, however, this warning is not just for ministers or Bible, teachers. Every Christian, in a sense, is a teacher. They're going to talk to somebody about Jesus. If they're going to talk to somebody who's found in the Word. Even our song leading, we see that, the songs that we choose and so on. So important. So parents, they teach their children. We all do that. We all teach our children, and we will make sure that we're doing right, especially when it comes to God. Friends influence friends. Co-workers watch our behavior and listen to our speech. In other words, this is what it is. All of us pretty much have an audience, and we will all face judgment of how we use our influence when it comes to God, when it comes to Jesus, when it comes to the spiritual side of everything in our life. So what James does is he does that 3:1, he shows that. Then he talks about basically the standard of perfection. And before I get to that, Dad, go ahead.
It's interesting, a good percentage of the world, unfortunately, doesn't believe or read the Bible.
Right.
But yet, if you go online, a lot of times, like in Facebook or some of the others, you'll see these things that talk about your children and how the words you say to them can harm these children as they're growing. So even the world really recognizes the pain that just maybe even a single word can cause.
That's exactly right. I mean, I was talking the other day with John and Shannon, I think it was yesterday, at their house. Just something I told him I saw a counselor talking about, and he was an adolescent counselor, and he was talking about the videos that are like on YouTube all the time and everything, where these adults are acting like children, and he said they have found it is destroying children. I mean, their minds. It's just not allowing them to think properly in the way they should as they're growing up. And that's a scary thought, but that's what we get at. We realize that, there's so much out there, And, we as parents have to be very careful with that, who's teaching our children. And so we see that, and it's just a remarkable thought, and, in that. So James, makes us clear about that, exactly. He makes us clear about everything here with that. And he says, there's a standard of perfection that comes with this. Now, we need to realize, James, what he does here, he immediately broadens his scope. He's going from teacher specifically, guess to who? Everyone, exactly right, to everyone now. And he highlights a universal truth. He says, every single one of us stumble. We all stumble. It's going to happen from time to time. In fact, let's see exactly what he says. If someone read verse 2, please.
For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body.
Thank you. So now think about this. The word perfect here does not mean sinless. We realize that. A lot of times when people hear the word perfect, that's exactly what they think. It means mature, of course, mature, complete, fully grown, whole, as we would see that. James makes a profound, I guess you'd say psychological and spiritual claim. If you can control your mouth, guess what you can control? He says, if you control your mouth, you control your entire life. That's how important this is. When we look at this, we go, why? Why would he say that? It's because the tongue is the hardest part of the entire human anatomy to guess what? To discipline. It's the hardest thing to do that. It reacts instantly to emotions. We know our tongue, our speaking does that. In fact, a lot of times even our tongue, which is kind of hard to figure out how it does this, but it'll speak before our mind even reflects on something. It just comes out. And my dad used to tell me, he taught me, I love how he'd bring regular, it's almost like a proverb, he'd bring parables, he'd bring regular everyday things in and use something spiritually. He took me out when we were shooting a gun. First time shooting a gun, young, little, and shooting, let me know very clearly, look, when that bullet goes out of that gun, you cannot reach out and grab it. You cannot get it back. So whatever you're pointing that thing at, whatever you shoot, it's going to hit. And you need to realize that. And then he goes, and by saying that, let's talk a minute about our bodies, about God. Our tongue is the same way. He goes, once that words come out of your mouth, guess what you can't do? You can't grab those things, try to retrieve them and bring them back. It just doesn't happen. It's already out there. And this is what James is getting at about our mind. Mastering the tongue is the ultimate sign of true spiritual maturity. It really is. And we need to realize, someone said, well, I'll never get there because I mess up. Remember what James said? James said we stumble. He said it happens. It's going to be there. So if you can bridle your tongue, you have developed the self-control necessary to keep the rest of your physical body always in check, is what we see with that. Dad, go ahead.
Another thing, you read, too, about people saying, well, when you reach a certain age, you're allowed to say anything you want.
Yeah.
Because you've heard that right. Well, that's ridiculous. Because so many times what some people want to do is dump their garbage on you, and that can hurt you.
Oh, yeah.
And none of us would take our garbage and dump it in the middle of our dining room table.
Right.
So why dump it on somebody?
That's exactly right.
Keep it, hold it, and try not to.
Exactly. Put it where it belongs. Exactly. Wherever you think of. David, go ahead.
We hear this expression sometimes describing someone, he or she doesn't have a filter.
Right.
And sometimes if we're not careful, we'll look at that as a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's really not, there are certain times when, we shouldn't say something.
Right.
Some people think, well, we should just say whatever is on our mind at all times, and that's not true. That doesn't line up with what Scripture tells us.
That's exactly right. When you think about what filtering, I love that word. You think about what filters do. They purify things. They clean them, and that's where our body, we have to be able to filter what's coming out of our mouth, and that's what we see with that. Dad, go ahead.
The other thing, I was just looking at some different scriptures. There's several in the Psalms that talk about the arrow piercing, not necessarily in a physical sense, but in the sense of your words are like arrows. You're aiming them at somebody, and they can hurt.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's why it's so important to realize, to control what's coming out of the mouth before it comes out. Like I said, we're not going to be able to retrieve it back. It's out there, and that's just it. Now, we try to do everything to fix what we've done, and a lot of times that will take care of that, but we just see how important that is. Which brings us to this next thought, small things with massive power. The power of direction. And, here he's going to talk about bits, and he's going to talk about rudders. And, you know, these are small little things, but it's amazing the power that they have in them and what they're able to do. So to help us understand, we see that this massive impact, James is going to give these two illustrations, and he begins here with a bit. James 3, verse 3, if someone would read that for us, please.
Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body.
Thank you. So, you know, if you've ridden horses, and I know a lot of us here have, or those of us who have, you understand, if you've ridden a horse with a bit, you know, you understand that, and if you've done it without, you understand the difference. Without a doubt, you can see that. I mean, you may have a well-trained horse that, you know, says, oh, it don't need a bit, it's doing fine, just bridle, but still, all it takes is a second, that's it. I mean, you think about this here. Here's a powerful horse that weighs over 1,000 pounds. It is, you know, packed with muscle, speed, and almost wild energy. And in fact, yet a human being can control that massive animal with a tiny piece of metal placed right on the tongue. It's by pulling those reins. You know, when you pull those reins, the rider can direct the horse in its direction that it needs to go. Like I've said before, you know, I've done for regular horses the younger ones, which was a mistake. Every time I got on one, everyone wanted me to get on it, I did. Well, he only weighed about $1.25, and I weighed about 190 pounds, and I jumped on this horse, and that thing didn't like it, and it didn't matter whether it had a bit in its mouth or not. It was doing everything it could to throw me off, and it did. You know, it threw me off. Got back up on it, did it again. I said, I'm done. You know, and you see that, think about it. But, you know, so we need to understand, even though that bit's in there, it may not do everything it needs to do, but it's doing something, and it can control a horse, and we see that. So James just shows us that, and he makes that very clear about it. What James is going to do, he said, okay, that's just one example. He goes, now I'm going to shift from agriculture, in a sense. I'm going to shift on over to navigation. And he goes to verse 4, and so we'll go and read this verse for us, please.
Look also at ships, although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot desires.
Thank you. Now this picture, this isn't a huge boat. I mean, it's pretty good size, but it's not massive. You see the man back there. I wanted you to see the rudder. A lot of times we just show a big ship and says rudder down below it down there. And so we see, so imagine a massive ship at sea. You know, have you ever been on a cruise or anything like that? Or military, been on a lot of boats and so on. It faces violent storms, huge waves, fierce winds, all that's out there. And what keeps it crashing into the rocks? Not the size of the hull, not the strength of the sails. It is that small little rudder that's compared to the boat, very small, you know, in the back as we see. And the pilot moves the rudder, and the massive vessel changes course. It changes to where it needs to go. And it's a remarkable feat, you know, when humans thought of this and started using that in that sense. So James, what he's trying to do, he's just trying to show us that, look, here's something very tiny, and it can control something very big. The tongue, here's something very tiny, and it's supposed to be able to control something bigger than itself. That is the body. And so he like I said, just like a list, he's throwing these things out here, and he throws the next one. He talks about the tongue boasting. So I'm going to read this verse here, verse 5, please.
So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great is the forest when you set the blade by such a small fire?
Thank you. So James connects these two powerful images directly to our speech. That's what he's doing here. He's putting it right there with it. The tongue, once again, is small physically, but its impact is monumental. And that's what you think about it. Just like a bit direct a horse or rudder a ship, your tongue directs the course of your life. It directs what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. I mean, it can actually, your tongue can change your entire life in one word. I mean, in one thing coming out that changes everything. So our words determine direction. That's what he's trying to get at. Remember, a bit can control the horse in a direction. The rudder can control the ship in a direction. And he's saying our tongue can also determine our direction. If we speak words of anger, bitterness, or maybe defeat, our life will move in that direction. If we speak words of truth, faith, and encouragement, our life would more likely align with God and His path. The tongue boasts great things. That's what this fire is about. Boasts great things because it knows it holds the steering wheel of our destiny. That's what's so important. You know, the mind is everything, of course. The mind is everything. The Bible talks to it as the heart, you know, and the mind is so important. But at the same time, like we said, sometimes this thing seems to do something before we even think about what it's saying. And that's why that's so important to look at the destiny that is involved with steering. Dad, go ahead.
I was going to say this idea of the fire, you know, in unless it's controlled, it can get out of hand. So can the words we speak that someone hears, and that could be an untruth.
Yep.
It could be something that really doesn't need to be talked about, but yet it spreads like wildfire.
It does, exactly right. I mean, that's why he talks about gossiping so bad. I mean, how many here have ever played the game telephone? Everybody done that where there's a circle of people and you say something, you've given a sentence saying, you say it in the ear here, then you say it in there, you're sitting right next to each other. By the time you get to the 7th or 8th person, guess what it's done? A lot of times it's changed. It's already changed. And then you get a little farther, the next thing you know, it gets around. And it has no sense at all compared to what was said. And notice that that's just people sitting right next to each other. So we see that. That's where, and it can spread like a wildfire. It's exactly right. Just keep going. So the danger, what we see, he talks about the danger of the spark and the uncontrolled fire. If anybody, been involved with fires, I was with the fire department for years and, doing that, and then being in Panhandle up in West Texas, that area, the wind would blow 60, 70 miles an hour like it was nothing. And when you got a fire involved, it would jump even higher. And we've had some massive fires. And here we are out there, we got our county, we got 3 or 4 other cities, coming out of county. And so we got all these fire trucks out there and everything. And let me tell you who's in control. Who do you think's in control? God. Well, the fire the fire's doing its own thing. And we're out there with water trying to move it in a different direction. We've done that before. The whole town was going to be engulfed. It was over 1.5 miles wide of fires. It was moving at 75 miles an hour. The planes couldn't even put it out. It just kept on. It was running so fast, killing cattle left and right. And there were about 40 fire engines. We put ourselves all the way around this town, and we hit the fire straight on as it came to us. And it came to us, and we split that fire. We made one go one direction, one the other. Now, it was bad, and now we have 2 fires. But we were able to control that away from the town, but guess what we couldn't control? We couldn't control where it was going to go, because it just kept going. And finally, we got it out after it burned over 1.5 million acres. I mean, it was just terrible. And so, what I'm saying is, this is how the tongue is. We can't, sometimes you say, we can't control it. We can control it, but we have to really work hard at it. And so, James moves from the image of direction to the image of destruction. He basically compares the tongue to a spark that sets off a massive fire. Look at verse 6. So we're going, and this even brings in the word hell into this point, about hell where we know where devil and his demons reside. So we're going to read that for us, please.
And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body, and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell.
Thank you. So a single spark can burn down millions of acres of forest, as we talked about. It starts small, unnoticeable, usually very quiet, and it can be just about anything. That's exactly how gossip or malicious, lies work. A small comment whispered in secret can destroy a marriage. It can ruin a reputation. It can tear apart a family, and it can even split a church. And we got to be so careful with that. James says that the untamed tongue is set on fire. Notice it says it's set on fire by hell. That's what he states. Satan does not need complex schemes, brother, to destroy a church. He just needs a drop of poison. One little drop of poison, guess where? Into a conversation. That's all he needs to do. And then it goes crazy from there. Go to Jennifer first. Jennifer, go ahead.
When I was attending Callahan, I asked the elder brother Hood to define gossip, because I was having a terrible time not gossiping. And so he did. And so when I started wrestling with myself to not gossip, I would have to tell myself, no, don't talk about it, don't talk about it, don't talk about it, don't talk about it. So I wouldn't call nobody and talk about something that came up.
Yeah.
And to get a handle on not gossiping, because it can be something that is hard to just not engage in talking about anything that you hear and just want to talk about.
That's right.
Gossiping it can be hard to contain that.
It can be. It takes work. It's like anything, It becomes a habit is what it actually does. And, habits are hard to break. We've seen that, but you are able to do it. That's a great example of that. You got to keep telling yourself, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And that's what we do. And that works with so many different things out there, as we would see. When we think about gossiping, gossiping is something that can hurt an individual, when you're talking about them or something. We see or something. Also, someone say, well, it's not gonna hurt them, yeah, but what if it said, and then like I said, it said something different. Then next thing you know, you weren't meant to hurt them, but it does. And that's why we see it, why it's so difficult, why it's such a bad thing in our lives. Dad, go ahead.
It only takes a spark to get a fire going.
That's exactly right.
And when we think about and reading God's Word, the majority of the time when we hear something about talking and how it affects the church, a word is used that says, don't murmur, don't complain. That, too, is a control that we need to make of the tongue.
Yep.
We murmur and we don't know if we're in that kind of situation. Rather than talking to the elders about it or family about it, we keep it to ourselves, and we don't keep it. We tell other people that have no reason to know what's going on.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's why the Bible, when Matthew tells us, we have something against somebody, something happens, go to them first, immediately. And you can't do that, take another person. You can't do that, take the elders, take the church, receive what goes from there. It gives us the inscription, the way to fix it. So what happens with this fire, though, it becomes this. It becomes an untamable beast. And this is what he talks about, the tongue, being an untamable beast in that sense. Human beings, love a challenge. Love challenges, don't we all? Throughout history, humanity has taken pride in conquering nature and conquering everything that's out there. And James points this out to show how unique the tongue actually is. And someone go and read this for us behind me, James 3, 7 through 8, please.
For every kind of beast and bird, a reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison.
Did y'all catch that? Did y'all catch what he just said there? No man or woman, anything can tame the tongue. I mean, think about that for a moment. That says a lot. What he means by it doesn't mean that it can't be done. You can't do it by yourself. That's what you're getting. You take God, it takes Jesus. You cannot fix your speech through human willpower alone. Left to our own strength, the tongue remains an unruly evil, is what it says there. Like a snake's venom, a toxic word injects pain into the listener that can linger in their soul. And I want you to get this, in their soul for decades. For decades, not just for a day or two or a month or a year. Decades. And really it should never get to that point. That should never ever happen. But he's saying that's what the tongue can do. And he said because of that, we talk about this double standard that is out there of verses 9 through 10. And this is probably one of the most tragic aspects of human speech. It's called inconsistency. James addresses the hypocrisy that often exists within the religious community. The Bible will teach one thing, and it's terrible when religion says, I know the Bible says that, but we're going to go ahead and teach this anyways. We're going to go ahead and do this. And that's it. And he understands it. And he's talking to the people, these 12 tribes that are out there, because they had a double standard. They were still wanting to hold on to a lot of the Jewish ways while they were holding on to their Christian ways. He said, that's a double standard. That's inconsistent. You can't do that. And so verses 9 through 10, someone will read that for us. You start on your left side there, and then move on over to the right side.
With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so.
Thank you. Now, you notice James says they shouldn't be so. He knows it happens without a doubt. It can happen to all of us. Think about just a Sunday morning experience. Here at worship, we gather with the church, use our tongues to sing praises to God. Then some way, then you walk outside, you get a phone call, not a good one that you want out there in the parking lot after services, and it makes you angry, and then basically next thing you know, maybe you're saying things over that phone you shouldn't be saying. I mean, saying you're doing this 1 second, next second you're doing this. That's just one example out of millions out there. Every human being is made in the image. You see that word there as we see above, similitude, as we find that. That word basically means that we're made in the image of God. That's what that is. So we cannot truly love the Creator while using His creation with our mouth, is what he's stating. Then he goes on. Remember I said James is throwing these things out there. I mean, and he move on because of time. Verse 11 and 12. Someone go ahead and read that for us, please.
Does the spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus no spring yields both salt water and fresh.
Thank you. What do you expect when you get to a spring? What do you expect you're able to do to it? Drink it without having any what?
Sickness.
Any sickness, any impurities, anything wrong with it, that's what you expect from a spring. In nature, a source determines its output. That's really what it is. A freshwater spring cannot produce salt water, is what he's getting at. Nature is consistent. A fig tree cannot produce grapes. It's just not going to have more, vice versa. Therefore, if our speech consistently is toxic, what it does, it reveals a structural issue. Guess where? With our inner source and with our heart. And when we say our mind, our heart, everything is there with it. And that's what James is trying to get us understanding. He's inspired by God to use every illustration he can think of that's so simple to understand, to explain what it deals with the heart. With the tongue, which brings us to the next one he talks about. He's going to talk about two kinds of wisdom. Basically, earthly wisdom, heavenly wisdom you have here. And you can just see the difference in the two, which you have there behind me. So in verse 13, James shifts his focus for just a moment. He moves from talking strictly about the tongue to talking about the source behind the tongue now he's getting to that point, which all has to do with wisdom. It really does. Where is our wisdom coming from? He connects our words and actions directly to our claims of faith and maturity, is what he pulls together. So we'll read that for us. Read verse 13, please.
With wise and understanding among you, let him show you good conduct, that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom.
Thank you. Now notice what he's doing. He's talking about wisdom here. He's talking about understanding. And then he talks about works. He talks about works. Now, works is something we're doing. It's an action. It deals with our faith. As we see, faith and works, go together. So James does not just tell people, be wise. He says, don't just do that. And he says, you need to show people that you're wise. True wisdom is not measured by advanced degrees, even though they're great to do those things, theological titles. As many will in the world, give themselves a title spiritually, from time to time. Someone asked me, they said, so you're not a reverend? And no, the Bible says not supposed to do that. And that blows their mind. And they explain that to me. It gives good opportunity for a second. But what we do is, it's basically, as we understand, or how loudly, I guess you say you would debate a point, true wisdom is visible in our daily conduct. And hopefully it's good conduct. That's what we're getting at, our daily good conduct. Notice the key phrase. Look at that verse right there where it says above, meekness of wisdom. True wisdom is, guess what? It's humble. True wisdom is humble. We talked a moment ago, we answered that question about the third captain with his soldiers, going to get Elisha, as we see there. And, it's not Elisha, So, as we see Elijah going there, and when he gets there, basically, he's the only one that did what? He humbled himself. And it worked out well for him. He used his words properly. The others, they blew it. So as we think about this, we need to realize it does not boast, it does not yell over people, it does not seek the spotlight, it speaks with quiet, strong gentleness. And I know that's hard to do a lot, and when we don't do it, we ask God to forgive us about it, move forward, but he says that's how you get to where you need to be. And so he moves on a little further with that. He says, all right, so I'm talking about this wisdom, and he goes, this is what we need to understand. What type of wisdom is earthly wisdom? He said it's earthly, sensual, demonic. That's what James gives it. He calls it demonized, basically. James contrasts this true, humble wisdom with a counterfeit version that is highly praised by the world, but completely destructive to the soul. And, it's kind of like we said with Hollywood. Hollywood is most of the time completely out of sync with the world. They don't have a clue, and they want to tell you about politics, they want to tell you this and that, and they don't have a clue what's going on because they're living in a fantasy world. And so that's what he's getting at. He says it's a counterfeit version here of earthly wisdom. Let's see what he says. Someone go and read verses 14 and 15, please.
But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic.
See, James points it out real quick. What's real, what's not. Look closely at the roots of the false wisdom, bitter envy and self-seeking. When a person operates out of desire to promote themselves, beat their competition, and look better than everyone else, they will use their tongue sometimes as a weapon. Now, I don't think I'm saying it's not wrong to win stuff. That's not it. But he says most of the time in these type of situations, they use their tongue as the weapon. That becomes the weapon. And they'll gossip to tear others down. They will lie to protect their own image. And it's a sad state of affairs. You know, James exposes the terrifying origin of the self-centered lifestyle. He says it does not come from God. He said it's earthly, limited to worldly thinking. It's sensual. Sensual means driven entirely by human feelings or maybe bodily desires. And ultimately, here's the worst part, is demonic, inspired by the enemy of our souls. And that is the devil himself. So think about these words, how they can manipulate, divide, destroy. He says, and James isn't saying, you know, don't talk, because, you know, when you get done reading James 3, you're kind of like this. I'm done. I'm not going to say another word to anybody. I'm not going to talk about. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, do your best to control what you talk. That's what he's saying. And if we make a mistake, remember what he said about the tongue not being able to be tamed. You know, he's saying, because we need to think. It doesn't mean it can't be done. Someone's like, what do I thought we could? It can be done, but not by our own worldly ways or worldly thoughts. That's what he said. It has to be done with God. And brings us to the last couple verses of fruit of the false wisdom. As we see here, James shows us the inevitable outcome of living by the world's standard. As we see there in verse 16, he says, for where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. Think about that for a moment. James shows us the inevitable outcome. He says, you know, when people focus entirely on their own rights, their own ambition, their own opinions, guess what happens with unity? Shattered. You know, in a marriage, you know, I always love when I counsel somebody before they get married, if they want to have counseling, and I always ask this question, and sometimes it's not all, most of the time I don't get the right answer. Most times, you know, I ask somebody, I said, what percentage are you going to give into this marriage? And usually the man will jump out and go, I'm going to give 50%. I'm like, that's not enough. And he goes, what do you think? He's thinking, you give 50% and the wife does what? She gets 50%, what does that make? That makes 100. No, both need to be given 100%, and we see that. And so that's what we get at here is what he's talking about. You know, unity can't be shattered. It has to be worked together. So the word confusion means, in this verse, means disorder, chaos, instability. In a home, in a church, in a workplace where self-seeking speech reigns, peace will vanish. It will vanish if self-seeking is the main thing that's reigning out there. David, go ahead.
You know, if you were to think of one word to summarize the entire book of James, it would be the source.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Who is the source of all good things? Chapter 1 is God.
Yep.
You know, who is the source of temptation? Well, it's our own desires.
Right.
You know, who is the source for showing partiality? James talks about that chapter 2. Chapter 3, our tongue. You know, we're responsible for that. And then he talks about the source of these two different wisdoms. You know, and he's talking about that James 1:5. If you don't understand that problem, you ask God.
Yep.
Here, you know, you need to be looking at what comes from God. You know, the right wisdom, the source.
That's so true. I mean, so true. And, you know, and James is a great book. Like I said, go read that book, read it. It is the book to clear out your thoughts of what a Christian should do and not do. I mean, it's so clear. You know, so we look at the side point, heavenly wisdom and the heart of the matter, verse 17. Someone read that for us, please.
But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy.
Thank you. I got 1 minute. So basically what we see here is these are characteristics of heavenly wisdom. This is what should direct us. This should show us how to direct our tongue. Very quickly, he says pure. It is a holy, clean, free from hidden motives or manipulation. That's what that word means. Next one, when he says peaceable, it actively seeks to bring harmony and resolve conflict rather than stirring up arguments. This is what we see from the Bible thought. Gentle, it is considerate and kind, refusing to use such words to bruise hearts or others. Willing to yield, it is reasonable, it is not stubborn, argumentative, or obsessed with always being right. Next one, full of mercy and good fruits. It is a quick to forgive and eager to help those who are hurting. Next, number 6, without partiality. It treats everyone equally, refusing to engage in cliques or favoritism. And then finally, number 7, without hypocrisy. It is completely genuine. The words spoken in the public match the private character of the heart. This is what he's getting at very quickly in these areas of that verse there. And then finally, the last one, the harvest of peace. I'll read this. Now, the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. I mean, that verse right there, it just sums it all up real quick. You know, if you want to have peace in your life, you have to make peace. That's the only way it's going to work. And he said, and the tongue is going to be a huge part of that. Either it's going to work in a peaceful way or it's going to work in a non-peaceful way. We had to make that choice, we had to make that decision, and I just love that God gives us a book like this that we can just use as an instruction manual of how to be a better Christian in our lives today. All right, any comments or questions? You know, I will say this too, this doesn't only help you in Christianity, James 3, it helps you in your everyday life. I mean, really, so much in your jobs, you know, and what we're involved in, employed in, and definitely without a doubt in our families. We see that. It's just a remarkable feat that we find here. So I'll close there. Before I close, I'll get Brother Doug. Go ahead.
When I was working, a man came in, and I guess he was trying to testify to me, but the first thing he said was, once saved, always saved. And I said, I don't think so. And then he started telling me all the stuff. And one of the first things he said was that he had been teaching a men's class at whatever church he went to for 40 years. And most of the stuff that he knew verses, he could quote verses, you know, just right off his head. But one of the last things he told me was that Paul was saved on the road to Damascus. And I said, no, Paul was not saved on the road to Damascus. He was told what to do to be saved. Well, he decided that I was not going to be an easy mark for him. But that's what James is talking about when he's talking about being a teacher. And that man should not have been teaching anybody. Most of the stuff that he said, and it's not just stuff that I have learned here. You know, it's stuff that I've learned straight out of the Bible. I mean, you read it, you know, right in there, and he was teaching them the wrong thing.
Yep.
40 years.
And that's why James says what he says, you know, about teachers being held to a higher accountability. And it's sad because that happens a lot in the world, all throughout the religious world in this Carolina. All right, we'll close it there. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate that.